The story starts with people having a dinner party outside a house to celebrate Nick. His mom gives a speech and mentions that Nick's dad is late. Nick suddenly gets up, cuts a cake with his face on it, then walks inside the house. He sits on a stool and points a gun at his head. But before he pulls the trigger, he wakes up. It was all just a dream. Now Nick is having breakfast with his mom. She made him a childish, smiley-face breakfast. Nick asks if she's thought about letting him take a riding course in London. She clearly isn't supportive, so Nick turns the smile on his food into a frown. He rides his bike to school. There, Nick does business with another student. He did that guy's homework for money. After handing it over, Nick's girlfriend sneaks up and asks if he's coming to a party tomorrow. Nick says he can't because he'll be busy. Next, we see a girl named Annie with two guys collecting money from someone who owes them. Annie threatens the guy with a knife, but only scratches his finger. In class, the student Nick helped is reading the homework aloud. The teacher asks Nick to do better. Nick goes to the front, sits on the desk, and reads his own poem. It's well written, but the class is bored. When the bell rings, everyone quickly leaves. At lunch, we learn the guy who got scratched is Nick's best friend, Pete. Nick tells Pete he needs to stand up for himself, but Pete says he can't. So Nick takes matters into his own hands. Nick pays off Pete's debt and whispers to Annie, "You're so broken. That was a mistake." Annie waits a moment, then beats Nick up. Later, Nick and Annie sit outside the principal's office. They talk, and Annie tells Nick he's no better than her because he sells homework. Nick admits he's a hypocrite. The principal arrives, sends Annie home, and warns Nick to stop wasting his time on people like her. He tells Nick he has a future. Nick simply asks if he can leave. We then see Annie at home. Her stepmother hasn't fed her little brother, Victor. An argument breaks out, but Annie ignores it and makes Victor a sandwich herself. Victor asks if she's going out tonight, and she says yes, clearly upsetting him. At Nick's house, Pete visits and jokes about Nick getting beaten up by a girl. Pete asks about the party, and Nick says he won't be around. He's leaving for London for the writing program. His mom doesn't know yet, but he's going anyway. Annie gets into a car with her boyfriend, Marcus. They rob a jewelry store. Annie smashes the glass, grabs jewelry, jumps into a stolen Mercedes, and Marcus speeds away. The next morning, Annie gets ready for school and leaves with the bag. Marcus tells her to leave the bag with him, but she refuses and says he won't do anything about it. She's wrong. Marcus secretly calls the police. At school, Annie puts the bag inside her locker. When she closes it, she notices Pete staring at her. A few minutes later, the cops arrive. They open Annie's locker, find the stolen jewelry, and arrest her. At the police station, Annie calls Marcus to tell him what happened. He asks how the police found out. Annie says she knows who did it and promises she'll handle it. After she's released, Annie is clearly out for revenge. Meanwhile, Pete says goodbye to Nick at school. They hug, and Nick heads home. There, his mom has discovered his ticket to London. The airline called about a flight change, which exposed his plan. She confronts Nick. He apologizes and says he wanted to talk to her, but she points out that he bought the ticket weeks ago. She realizes he was going to leave no matter what she said. Hurt, she tells him she feels like she's been living with a stranger. Nick goes to his room to pack. He takes a watch and puts it in his pocket. Later, Pete is walking quickly when he's suddenly punched. It's Annie's crew. They kidnap him and bring him to Annie. Annie believes Pete is the one who snitched on her. She beats him and demands the truth. Pete can't take the pain anymore and finally says he'll tell her who did it. He blames Nick, thinking Nick has already left the country. But Nick's flight was delayed. Instead of leaving, Nick is at the party with his girlfriend. He asks if she wants to go to London and tosses her the ticket, telling her to enjoy it. As Nick walks home, a car starts chasing him. It hits him and forces him into a ditch. Annie and her crew jump out and begin beating him. Pete steps out of the car and tries to explain that Nick isn't the one who betrayed her. But no one listens. Annie grabs Nick and asks him who's really broken. Even then, Nick answers, "You are." Enraged, Annie beats him again and kicks him hard in the face. The kick kills him. They dump Nick's body into a hole. Annie goes home and confesses everything to Marcus. She tells him she beat up the person who sold her out. Marcus is shocked because he knows for sure that wasn't the snitch. He asks why she even came to him, reminding her that he's on parole. Then he tells her to leave. Annie feels betrayed. Angry, she smashes things in his workshop, gives him a bitter kiss, and walks away. Early the next morning, we see Annie burning the clothes she wore the night before. Then we see Nick. He walks out of the woods looking perfectly fine, clean and untouched. He goes to school and sits in class. But no one can see him. Nick realizes he's invisible. Even though he's sitting right there, no one notices him or knows he's listening. His classmates start talking about him openly, including his girlfriend. She calls him pretentious and says he's always trying to feel important. At first, Nick thinks they're joking. But when he throws a book at a shelf, it doesn't move. He tries using the phone in the principal's office to call his mom, but nothing happens. The principal walks in and can't see him. Nick shouts for his mom. He hears her talking to detectives about him, but she can't hear him at all. Panicking, Nick runs home. Along the way, he bumps into someone in the hallway, gets hit by a car, and even run over by a truck. But nothing affects him. When he reaches home, detectives are everywhere searching for him. Nick tries desperately to tell his mother that he's dead, but she can't hear him. Now, Nick wanders the streets alone. Meanwhile, detectives Brian and Kate continue investigating his disappearance. They talk to the principal, who mentions Nick fought with Annie. That leads them to Annie's house. Brian knows Annie from when she was younger. Her dad used to be a cop. The detectives question Annie on the roof about what she did the night before. Nick is there, watching her lie. He also realizes the truth. Annie beat him because she thought he had snitched on her. Furious, Nick pushes her off the roof. But nothing happens. The detectives organize a search party in the woods where Nick's body was dumped. Annie calls Pete and tells him to be there. Nick hears this and becomes visibly shaken. Nick is back in his room, watching his mom go through his things. She reads one of his poems, and Nick quietly reads along with her. His pet, Brad, appears beside him in this invisible world. Nick holds the pet in his hands, but after a few seconds, it disappears. That's when it hits him. Nick realizes he's still alive. He says, "I'm alive." Nick runs straight to the woods where his body was left. He tries to guide the search party to him, but the people can't see or hear him. A dog seems like it can sense Nick at first, but then it turns away. Still, the dog helps by finding Nick's watch. Pete reports back to Annie and the rest of the group. He thinks the truth will come out soon and says he wants to go to the police. Annie warns him that if he talks, he'll go to jail too. Nick hears everything. Annie sneaks back home and starts packing to run away. Her little brother, Victor, wakes up and asks if she's leaving forever like their mom. Even though Annie acts tough, she softens with him. She tells Victor never to become like her. Their dad enters and tells Annie to leave. She agrees, but warns him that if anything happens to Victor, she'll come back for him. Annie leaves the house. Nick delivers another silent monologue, saying that her broken family doesn't excuse what she's done. The search in the woods grows more intense. Helicopters and ambulances arrive. An officer says that if Nick is alive out there, he only has 2 or 3 days left. We finally see Nick's body, and his fingers twitch. He's actually alive. Detective Brian visits Marcus and questions him. Brian asks if Marcus was with Annie on Tuesday night, and Marcus says yes. He then asks about the night before, when the jewelry store was robbed. Marcus denies knowing anything about that. Brian mentions that Marcus has been on parole for 8 months, but doesn't push it. He leaves his card and asks Marcus to call if he sees Annie, saying he wants to talk to her about a missing student from her school. Before leaving, Brian makes sure Marcus knows something else. He knows the exact brand of the car that was stolen the same night the jewelry store was robbed. Nick tells his mom that he knows this won't change anything, because she always needs to be in control. He yells at her, shakes her, knocks everything off the table, and even throws a chair through the window. But none of it is real. She can't see or feel him. A moment later, his mom breaks down. She cries hard and keeps calling Nick's name. Elsewhere, Pete is walking in the rain when Marcus suddenly appears. Marcus grabs him and presses a gun to his chest. He says the police are following Pete, and they are. Marcus forces Pete into the woods, where Pete shows him the spot where Nick's body was dumped. The next day, Marcus tries to lure Annie to a meeting place. She senses something is wrong and sends Pete instead. Nick desperately tries to get Detective Kate to notice what's happening. Pete goes to the meeting and is secretly followed by Kate. Pete arrives at a bridge with 2 of Annie's guys. Annie watches from a distance. Suddenly, Marcus sneaks up behind her and points a gun at her back. He drags her to the bridge and tells Pete to go home. Pete runs off, relieved. Marcus says they need to move fast because Pete is being followed. He's right, but it's already too late. The police surround them. Annie grabs the gun from Marcus and aims it at the cops. Even though she's trapped, she finds a way to escape and runs. Nick shouts that they'll catch her. Annie turns around and yells something back. Nick realizes she heard him. Annie goes to a club and sells one of Marcus's rings. After getting paid, she stays and dances. She takes off her hoodie and beanie and dances freely while Nick watches. The next day, Annie visits her mother's grave and apologizes. Nick talks about how he sometimes wished his mom had died instead of his dad because of the pressure she put on him. He reaches out and touches Annie's shoulder. He tells her he knows she can hear him and asks her to tell the police where his body is. Annie doesn't respond. She stands up and walks away. Nick follows her. Annie breaks into the school at night. She puts money into an envelope for Victor and leaves it inside her locker. Nick appears and tells her he's dying and doesn't have much time left. Ironically, She's the only one who can save him. She can hear his voice in her head. When he screams her name, she turns around, but no one is there. Annie takes a shower, and Nick politely looks away. Meanwhile, the real Nick, the one buried in the hole, opens his eyes. Later, Annie sleeps on the basketball court. Nick lies beside her, gently running his hands through her body and calling her name. She oversleeps and wakes up when the basketball team arrives to practice. Next, Annie goes to Nick's house. She looks through his old photos and feels nostalgic. Nick's mom walks in, ruining the moment. Annie quickly leaves and runs straight to the woods where Nick's body was dumped. But the body is gone. Nick tells her someone must have moved it and asks her to think. Annie notices the same substance she once found on Pete. That makes her realize Pete was there. She confronts Pete at school. Pete tells her Nick never snitched on her. He then admits that he and Marcus moved Nick's body. Annie immediately goes after Marcus. She ambushes him in his car outside the police station. She forces him to a cliff, makes him kneel, and points a gun at him. At the same time, Pete tries to kill himself. Nick begs him to stop, but Pete can't hear him. While Pete is in between life and death, he finally sees Nick. They can see and talk to each other. Nick asks Pete where the body was moved. At the same moment, Annie asks Marcus the same question. Both Pete and Marcus answer at the same time. Pete's parents rush into his room and find him. Annie turns and leaves Marcus to go find Nick. As she walks away, Marcus stands up and shoots her. She survives. With what strength she has left, Annie shoots Marcus, then calls Detective Brian. She tells him where Nick's body is. She also tells him there's something in her locker for Victor and asks him to make sure her brother gets it. The police rush to the dam where Nick's body is, but Nick reaches it first. He's with his body now, knowing he can't save himself. The dam gates open and water floods in. Nick starts to drown. Kate orders the gates to be closed, and the police search frantically. Brian finds Nick, and they rush him out. Nick is still alive. They load him into an ambulance. From far away, Annie watches, badly injured and bleeding. She gets into her car and blacks out for a while. Later, a cop wakes her and tells her to step out of the car, but she ignores him and drives off. At the hospital, Nick's mom watches as doctors fight to save her son. The police surround Annie with guns drawn. But then she hears Nick's voice in her head. "I need you, Annie. I need you." That's all she needs. She floors the gas and drives through the police blockade. She abandons the car and runs the rest of the way. Nick guides her to where his body is being worked on. When she gets there, Nick's mom stops her and starts yelling. Annie says she has to talk to Nick, but his mom slaps her. Annie tells her Nick is there, that she can hear and feel him, and she knows what he wants. Nick's mom doesn't believe her. So Annie tells her something only Nick would know. About the night she was in his room reading his poems and how he was there with her. Nick's mom finally asks what Annie wants. Annie says she just needs to see Nick and that she can help him. At first, his mom refuses. Annie hands over her gun and says she knows she can bring him back. Reluctantly, Nick's mom lets her go in. Annie touches Nick, apologizes, and begs him not to leave. She removes the necklace that once belonged to her mother and places it in his hand. She lies beside him and holds him close. At that moment, the invisible Nick disappears. The real Nick wakes up and calls Annie's name. Annie says she just wanted to do one good thing. Nick tells her she did. She saved him. Then Annie dies. Later, we see Victor playing with a toy plane. Nick appears and talks to him. Victor says his sister died. Nick tells him they should send her a message. Victor's message is simple. "Hey Annie." Nick writes it on the plane, and together they let it fly.
And that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Comment down below what movies do you like us to recap next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.